Previously on the Poppy Day bomb.
I was blown to the other side of the road.
The blast demolished a building just a few feet from the War Memorial in Enniskillen's Belmore Street.
The world around us just stopped. It was just an eerie silence.
To this day, I can still see that in my mind's eye.
The soul of our family was taken away that day.
I couldn't believe that one human being could do that to another.
And that boy's name was Mario.
Mr. Forth, does my right honourable friend believe that the lessons of Fontainebleau...
This is the House of Commons in London. Members of Parliament are sitting in their suits on the famous green leather benches. It's Prime Minister's questions.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, to the last part of my honourable friend's question with the same determination, because not all of our colleagues are...
Margaret Thatcher, the so-called Iron Lady, with her uncompromising style, is speaking.
With fashioning the details of the regulation.
It's the afternoon of Tuesday the 8th of December 1987, exactly 1 month after the Enniskillen bomb ripped through my hometown. At this point, 11 people had died.
Roy Beggs!
An MP called Roy Beggs gets up to ask a question. He's an Ulster Unionist from Northern Ireland and represents a largely Protestant constituency. This is actually the first time I've heard this audio.
Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister follow up her brief chat at Copenhagen with Mr. Hockey and request the extradition of Charles Caulfield, living openly in the Irish Republic, believed to have masterminded the Enniskillen Remembrance Day massacre?
This is an extraordinary statement, not least because it's coming from an MP rather than the police. Beggs says a man called Charles Caulfield is the mastermind behind the Enniskillen bomb and is living openly in the Republic of Ireland, south of the border.
And also believed to have been responsible with others in a 4-man hit squad for the murders of over 100 people in Northern Ireland, and indeed presently believed to be controlling and organising IRA activities in Fermanagh.
The MP also claims that Caulfield's in a 4-man hit squad responsible for over 100 deaths in Northern Ireland and is still running the IRA's operations in Fermanagh, where Enniskillen is the county town. Beggs is able to make these allegations under something called parliamentary privilege. British MPs have legal immunity to speak freely in the Commons. The man the MP wants to extradite to the UK, Charles Caulfield, was 31, a farmer from a village over the border in the Republic of Ireland, about 30 miles from Enniskillen. The village was known for its Republican sympathies, actively hostile to British rule in Northern Ireland, and so was Caulfield. He'd already been convicted of firearms offences linked to IRA activity. The Prime Minister responds, talking about her Irish counterpart.
Mr. Speaker, I did let the Taoiseach know of my strong views on extradition, the changes that have been made, in the same terms as I had spoken about them to the House.
Now, calling for extradition was controversial at the time, but this seems strong grounds, and the pressure was on.
They cannot be found guilty unless they're brought to a court, but if they're accused of crime, should be brought before a proper court and be found either innocent or guilty.
Innocent or guilty? Well, we've never had an answer to that, because Caulfield never was extradited. He denies any involvement, but almost 40 years later remains the only person blamed for orchestrating the bomb. But before I start finding out more about Charles Caulfield, I want to understand as much as I can about how this atrocity happened. Just what is known. You're listening to the Poppy Day Bomb, a podcast series from The Times and The Sunday Times, with me, Mario Ledwith. This is part 2, The Aftermath. When the Good Friday Agreement was signed in 1998, that historic peace deal that largely ended almost 30 years of violence, I was just 10.
Good evening. Within the last few minutes, the parties involved in the Northern Ireland peace talks have reached an agreement.
But I want to say this to the politicians and to the people of Northern Ireland with all the force that I can muster. Even now, this will not work unless in your will and in your mind you make it work. Unless we extend the hand of friendship to those who were once foes.
By that stage, I'd already gone to one of the first integrated primary schools in Northern Ireland, where Catholic and Protestant children mixed. My school was actually founded in the aftermath of the Enniskillen bomb. I left Northern Ireland in 2006 to live across the water in England, eventually moving to London. And in my new home, something that always struck me, even annoyed me, was a lack of knowledge about the trauma my homeland had just been through. I've been a reporter for 13 years. Strangely though, I've rarely reported on Northern Ireland. And when I told a school friend about a year ago that I was considering investigating the Enniskillen bomb, they said to me, "Isn't that a bit close to home?" You see, for all the progress that's been made in my homeland, some things are still too uncomfortable to talk about. To some, peace in the present day means forgetting the past. But we can't just shy away from things because they're complicated. As they say, how can you draw a line in the sand when the wind is still blowing?
So here's the evidence. It's a little baby with black hair in this photo. And
this investigation is unlike anything I've done before. My motivation is personal, not just professional. I was born 2 days after the IRA bomb, and when I talk about the IRA in this series, I mean the provisional IRA.
Date of birth, 10th of the 11th, 1987.
As unusual as it is, the first person I speak to is my mum. I guess I'm trying to understand what's driven me to come back here and take this on.
Time of birth, 5:45 p.m. Mother's name, Leanna. There you go. Quite chubby cheeks there as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
I can still remember the chubby cheeks.
So obviously, a slightly strange way to come into the world against that background. After this happened, you and Dad have your first baby. Did you ever worry about bringing kids up in a society where people ultimately left bombs in the street and blew each other up?
I would say it did cross our minds, but deep down we felt that this was a horrible, devastating, terrible thing to happen, but we had hope that things would get better after that and that it would not happen again. Even since you went off to work in England, you know, when you come back, things with sort of memories would come back and you would talk about it. And I do remember at one stage going through your memory box and you did feel very deeply about the Troubles because somewhere in your memory box there's a letter that you wrote to Mo Molan.
Mo Molan was the Northern Ireland Secretary for the British government.
It was about the Troubles. And you were only a young child yourself. And I think it's something that you've tried to understand. And I think deep down, it's had an impact on you more than you maybe realise yourself.
I think it's impossible to be brought up here, and I say this knowing that I was at the advantageous side of the scale because life was comfortable here. But I think it's impossible for it not to pass you by and to seep into you somehow. Because the structure is still us and them. And that's unusual.
Yeah.
After the bomb, tensions inevitably arose between the communities. Suspicions crept in.
I remember going into a shop. They started to talk about the bomb and they started to talk about the IRA. And just being a customer in that shop, I actually wanted to shrivel up and hide under a stone, so to speak. because they mightn't have known I was a Catholic, but I knew I was a Catholic, and I just felt I did not know where to turn or what to say. I think I actually just walked out quietly to get away from the atmosphere.
There were those who wanted to stoke those divisions. During the Troubles, there were also paramilitaries on the Unionist or Loyalist side. One was the Ulster Volunteer Force, a Protestant organisation that saw its objective as defending Northern Ireland and killing those in the IRA. You've got to remember, in these paramilitary or terrorist groups, these weren't professional soldiers. They were people like you and me, with normal jobs and families, who had guns and built homemade bombs, effectively declaring war on their neighbours over whether Northern Ireland should stay a part of the United Kingdom. In the aftermath of Enniskillen, a high-ranking member of the Ulster Volunteer Force travelled to Fermanagh to meet senior figures of the Unionist community. He offered to set up a local unit to strike back against the IRA. The proposal was turned down. Thankfully, Enniskillen didn't descend into sectarian violence, much to the relief of people like Clive Armstrong, whose father was killed by the bomb.
I remember, actually, I think my father's funeral, and the chief constable was there, and the great and the good. There was a political statement from Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister at the time, and she said, no stone shall be left unturned until we find the perpetrators of this. And that was very, very much the opinion of, I suppose, everybody at the time that was affected. Justice will prevail.
That message from Margaret Thatcher was clear. So did every stone get turned over?
Hello, how are you? I'm Mario, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Hi, yes, go ahead.
The next person I wanted to speak to was the man who wrote a book about the Enniskillen bomb. My old boss, Denzil McDaniel.
Hiya.
How you doing, alright?
Yeah, not too bad. Grab a seat.
That was very funny. We actually went to...
In fact, initially, I went to the wrong house.
We pulled up and I was like, this is my best friend's house.
Uh-huh.
Not Denzil's house. And I was like, have you...
I'm Denzil McDaniel, former editor of the local paper, The Impartial Reporter.
I was just going to say, would you like a cup of tea before you start?
I would love a cup of tea.
And I was the first journalist on the scene at the Enniskillen bomb in 1987.
I actually began my journalist career at The Impartial Reporter, where I freelanced for a year after university, and Denzil was my editor.
I'm a proud Enniskillener. I was born in Cornagrade housing estate, which is a very mixed housing estate, was then, still is, where Protestants and Catholics grew up together. My Catholic friends went to a different school to me, on some occasions played different sport to me. They played Gaelic football, which I'm a big fan of, even though I'm a Protestant and never played it. But during my childhood, we had a large green in front of the house where the boys all came down and just played football together.
Denzil's a gentle and generous man. He's small in stature, but has a mountain of knowledge. And, like any good local newspaper editor, he knows everybody.
When we would go from the estate into town, the main street, places like cafes, pubs, etc., there was really no division there. You can go into most places and socialise together and join together. So it was one of those towns where people just got on so well together, which is probably why it seems so incongruous to me that Enniskillen was chosen for such a horrible event.
This is something I've heard again and again. Why Enniskillen?
Working on autopilot at that stage, trying to get all the information in. And every now and again you would think about the personal aspect of the story, hearing the Gordon Wilson interview.
Then somebody squeezed my hand and Mary said, "Dad, is that you?" Couldn't believe it. The fifth time I asked her, she said, "Daddy, I love you very much." Those were the last words she spoke.
Gordon Wilson, whose 20-year-old daughter, Mary, was crushed to death, told reporters that he'd prayed for the IRA bombers.
I prayed for the bombers last night. God would forgive them. I bear them no ill will.
And to hear Gordon Wilson talking about his daughter's last words and so on, where it was really, really emotional and very tough, and something just snapped inside me, and I just burst into tears.
That interview had an enormous impact. Gordon Wilson would go on to become an Irish senator and renowned peace campaigner. Denzel and I then went to Belmore Street, where the community centre had been, in which the IRA placed the bomb, where there was bingo the evening before, and where 4 men playing cards late into the night heard footsteps, or thought they did. The centre was known locally as the Reading Rooms, and was next to the War Memorial.
Yeah, I have a very vivid memory of a local man who I would have known. And at the bottom of this little hill, he was the first person I saw. I walked across to him and I said, "What happened?" And he just shook his head and with incredible understatement just said, "It's bad, it's bad."
So we're standing outside what is now the Clinton Centre, Denzel, but would have been in those days the Reading Rooms, which was a building that was owned by the Catholic Church actually.
So you've got the War Memorial in front of you. The parade comes up the full length of Belmore Street. So you're now sort of like it's almost 3 sides. So on this side, what happens is the ex-servicemen with their medals and the soldiers and so on, they stand here to attention, waiting for the last post, waiting for the exhortation, "They shall grow not old." On the other side, you would have people from youth organisations, scouts, kids who would be ready to lay a poppy wreath.
As Denzel and I are talking, we're standing in the exact spot where all those who died that day would have gathered.
Back in those days, just a short distance across the footpath here was the iron. It was a very heavy iron railing as well.
Because it actually acted as a barrier, I'm guessing. It's quite a gruesome thought really, but it has to be considered when we reflect on these things. But you have a concrete wall, and actually if we think about it, as we now know the layout of the Reading Rooms, the bomb can't have been very far from where we are actually standing. It must have been presumably within a couple of metres.
As soon as the bomb exploded, this wall, the whole building virtually disintegrated, but this particular wall where people were standing would have been the one that fell out into the street on top of the spectators.
In the 1980s, while most people in Northern Ireland were Protestant, there was a Catholic minority. They had long felt abandoned, harassed and discriminated against by the authorities over housing, employment and even in elections. It was this ill treatment, combined with oppressive policing, that fueled the IRA. In the 80s, the IRA carried out its operations through small cells, known as active service units, operating on both sides of the border. When it came to the Poppy Day bomb, the device was made in the Republic of Ireland, and it was transported to Enniskillen by a team of IRA members. An operation involving considerable planning, a cross-border operation. I've spoken to a police source who said the bomb was moved to a safe house on the outskirts of the town on the Friday. From there, it was eventually placed inside an old sports bag and positioned in the Reading Rooms the next day.
You know, they reckon the bombers would have come in to Belmore Street on the Saturday evening. They were going to park somewhere handy on the street where people were maybe coming home from pubs or whatever, so they're going to park on the street not to be seen, and it would have been that sort of access on that side that they would have got into.
Yeah. And this was, we now know, a door that was lying open that night. So not lying open, but it was openable, it wasn't locked. So anybody could have walked in and out. Maybe the fact that it was accessible means it wasn't as suspect to see somebody going into a public place, basically, a community place.
Yeah.
It was November, so dark by 5 o'clock, and it was busy in the Reading Rooms. At one point, there were upwards of 60 people playing bingo. Pubs nearby were full of drinkers, so it wouldn't have been too hard to be relatively inconspicuous, despite the heightened security for Remembrance weekend.
And so there's this door at the front, which they could have gained access to the building from, and also there's a gate at this side, is that right, which leads into the back. And I think some of the documents we've seen suggest that gate was approached on the morning of during the sweep, and a soldier tries to open the gate, and it's at that stage locked.
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah, there were two two conflicting reports from two witnesses. There is a gate on this side of the reading rooms, and one report said that the caretaker apparently said when he left on the Saturday night late, the gate was open, but a young soldier who was doing a sweep of the area early Sunday morning said the gate was locked. So we don't really know at what stage the gate was locked, and that again raises questions as to what actually happened the night before.
Who might have locked the gate? At what stage?
Yeah.
Was it actually locked at all?
Yeah.
So, what do we know of the police investigation in the immediate aftermath of the bombing? Well, I've seen a report that says on the day of the attack, 7 houses were raided. The same report says a month later, in December, 8 men were arrested by the local police for alleged terror offences.
In my opinion, it was the classic round up the usual suspects, bring in known Republicans, see what you can find out.
Over the next 2 years, 2 more men would be arrested. But ultimately, all 10 were released without charge, to the disappointment of bereaved families.
I remember there's sort of quite a bit of murmurings, I suppose, between sort of the relatives of those who were murdered, and, you know, maybe a phone caller here or there, and sort of say, oh, they haven't got them, you know, no evidence, can't. And yeah, it was a strange time.
It's now very hard to find out more about those arrests, who they were, the evidence against them, the line of questioning. That's because a decade later, all the documents were destroyed as part of a clean-up operation. Asbestos had been found in the police station where the documents were stored. On that Sunday morning, and on the evening before, security forces did a sweep of the area. They would have checked every nook and cranny of Belmore Street, cordoned off the area, and monitored roads. The reading rooms was a key location, directly facing the cenotaph, and it was in front of this building that people always gathered. But for some reason, in 1987, it wasn't searched.
I don't know why the reading rooms wasn't searched. It's a vital, vital question.
It's worth remembering why Denzil says this is such a vital question. Firstly, there had been violence in the town that year. In January, a part-time RUC officer was killed by an IRA bomb that had been hidden in a bin on the high street. Secondly, the Ulster Defence Regiment would be marching that day. The UDR was the British Army's largest infantry unit at the time. Controversially in the Troubles, its soldiers came overwhelmingly from the local Protestant community. It was loathed by many Catholics for its often heavy-handed approach and collusion with loyalist paramilitaries, and naturally, it was a prime target for the IRA.
In the immediate aftermath, the Chief Constable of the RUC, Sir John Herman, came to Enniskillen and gave a press conference. That question was asked, why was the reading rooms not searched? His answer was that they didn't consider it to be a credible threat, that the IRA would never attack Remembrance Sunday, and even if they did, they would directly attack the UDR soldiers who were on parade at the other end of the street. So his rationale was there was no need to search that building.
The official line has always been that the building was considered low risk, and so the reading rooms were not searched in 1987 or in the years before the bombing.
I hope, well, 2 things immediately. First, that everyone will concentrate their efforts on finding these people who've done it and bring them to justice. There should be no hiding place in any country for these people. And secondly, I hope that anyone the world over who's ever had any sympathy, however misplaced, for these, will not have any more now,
because every nation should honour its dead.
Despite Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher's words, in less than 3 weeks after 11 people were murdered by an IRA bomb, while another lay in a coma, the police allegedly took the decision to downgrade the investigation.
It was suddenly being taken on by a couple of lower-ranking officers, and I thought that was fairly significant. I just thought, in the atmosphere at the time, I thought the investigation should have been much more robust, and that raises questions for me as well.
It seems incomprehensible. I've been talking to former police officers. One said, there was an assumption they would never solve it. He said the investigation remained open, but the resources that flooded in immediately after were moved elsewhere. They were moving on to the next disaster. He also claimed the investigation was dreadful. I asked the police service of Northern Ireland about the failure to search the reading rooms and the criticisms of their investigation. They said that they are now prohibited from undertaking any troubles-related investigations and don't want to say or do anything that could compromise any future case by another body. Now, the investigation was allegedly being wound down at about the same time that Roy Beggs MP stood up in the House of Commons and named Charles Caulfield as the alleged mastermind.
Will the Prime Minister follow up her brief chat at Copenhagen with Mr. Hockey and request the extradition of Charles Caulfield, living openly in the Irish Republic, believed to have masterminded the Enniskillen Remembrance Day massacre?
I was quite surprised to hear the name Caulfield. It was new to me. Maybe that's a feeling on my behalf. I spoke to Republican friends that I knew and asked them, and they flat out denied that Charlie Caulfield had anything to do with it. I took that with a pinch of salt, because that's just the way they operate. The other side of it was that security sources would say that he was almost, oh yes, we know this, we know that. And again, I tended to take that with a pinch of salt because that's the way they operated. They would say, oh, we know it was so-and-so, we know it was so-and-so, and yet so-and-so was never charged or seriously investigated. So the truth is, I don't think either side really knew because it was such a tight operation.
Caulfield issued a robust denial. He was a member of Sinn Féin, the political arm of the IRA, but said in a statement that he totally repudiated the allegations that he was involved in the bomb or a member of the paramilitary group. He also criticised the press for, in his words, attempting to use the cloak of parliamentary privilege to report these libelous remarks. I found several photos of Caulfield. One is from the funeral of a revered IRA man around a year and a half before the Enniskillen bomb. In it, Caulfield helps place an Irish tricolour flag on the coffin. He's trim with shaggy hair, wearing a suit with a black tie. In a later photo from 1997, he's again in a suit, his hair now receding and neatly pushed back.
I think the fact that his name has been centre stage for so many years, this is just a personal opinion, but I think it's quite dangerous. That was quite symptomatic of the Troubles and the way the intelligence services worked. And it did throughout the 80s become something of a dirty war, and there were all sorts of things happening and all sorts of names being bandied about. I think a lot of questions are still being asked about Enniskillen, quite rightly. And one of the big questions is, was Charlie Caulfield involved? And if he was, why isn't he being charged? And if he wasn't, why isn't his name being cleared?
So what happened to those calls to extradite Caulfield? Well, the British government has never actually confirmed whether they made such a request of the Irish, and they wouldn't tell me when I asked. But 2 years later, in 1989, any prospect of his extradition became even harder, because he was now living in the United States. I wanted to ask the former MP Roy Beggs, now in his late 80s, about why he named Caulfield and that whole episode, but he didn't want to comment on such a sensitive matter. Now, Charles Caulfield may have left simply because of the allegations, and perhaps that was the intention of the statement in Parliament. I just don't know. But in 1998, the United States government prosecuted Charles Caulfield for not declaring criminal convictions on his green card application when entering the country. This could have led to his deportation. In an interview around that time, Caulfield tells a reporter, "I am no criminal. I have committed no crimes, certainly not in this country."
I am not a criminal, I committed no crimes, and I certainly didn't commit any in this country. And so we should not even be in this situation.
Ultimately, Caulfield won his case. The US didn't deport him. However, during my investigation, I've heard that Charles Caulfield may be back living in the Republic of Ireland, not far from the border and in Enniskillen. On the Saturday evening before the Poppy Day bomb, an off-duty police officer was sitting outside the reading rooms. He was in his car, waiting for his wife. Suddenly, something caught his attention. He saw a number of leading IRA figures on the street. A moment later, they entered the reading rooms. That's next time on the Poppy Day bomb. You've been listening to the Poppy Day Bomb, a podcast series from the Times and Sunday Times, with me, Mario Ledwith. It's written by me and Will Rowe. The series producer is Will Rowe. Additional producing on this episode by Kate Lamble. The executive producer is Lynn Jones. Original music and sound design is by Tom Birchall. The commissioning editor is Kate Ford. The head of podcasts at the Times is Dan Box. We're continuing to investigate this story, and we'll report more if we get new leads. If you have any tips or information that you want to share with me or the team, you can email confidentially. You'll find contact details in the description notes.